Welcome to the first release of the presentation for salespeople at Cyrano. Video cassette, where we are going to demonstrate 5 presentations. The first one is a corporate overview. It's what we call the CIO presentation for our prospect and customers. The second one is going to be done by Stuart Wash for client pack. We will include PowerPoint presentations and rolling demos. The third one will be done by Jeff Skyrick regarding DB pack, Cyrano Workbench, Cyrano Production. Jeff is also going to do the fourth one, that will be for Cyrano Migration Pack. And finally, Stuart will do on the fifth one, we'll do the server pack presentation. Let's start right away the Cyrano CIO presentation, that is a corporate overview and product overview. The company is located everywhere in the world, and we have now more than 1,800 customers. But when we talk to you customers, what are you dealing with? You are dealing with your value of your company, and you are dealing with cost, and you expect from the cost a return on investment. But between both, you need to manage the risk, and Cyrano is dedicated to help you to reduce your risk. When we talk about value of computing, we can say that if value 1 is on the networking, value 2 on hardware, the value of your computing is on your corporate policy, on your user skills, and on your application. Where do you want to have your guys working? You want them to focus on the upper layers. The quality assurance is going to be like a shield to protect your value, your high value layers from where you want, from the database, from operating system and computer, where you do not want to have your people spending time on. What's the challenge today? What's the challenge of a manager? The challenge of a manager in a computing area is to manage complexity. Why? Because today market conditions change. You need to change your business processes. And to change your business processes, you try to find a technical solution to solve it. And this is your challenge. In fact, you are looking for building tomorrow's application with today's technology, and this is your challenge. This is also a risk, and we are going to help you work with. In fact, your risk comes from the time you are going to spend to correct your application, the time you are going to spend to put into production an application. One thing is for sure, it costs 5 times more to fix a problem after production than fixing it before. Your issues are also the money you are going to spend. 47% of budget dedicated for an application are over budget. 33% of application experience downtime. And we can speak about loss of business and deadline that you cannot meet. What is our vision? How are we going to reduce your risk? Our job, we see that what you need is a unified product set to improve the quality of your applications during the development. And to do that, you need a methodology. You need also corporate standards, and we are going to provide products and methodology to help you to set up these kind of standards. But mainly, you do not need a product that are going to count your problems. You need products that are going to solve them. And of course, the QA process is not an afterthought. It's really something you need to set up at the beginning when you start development. And the most important, you cannot afford to set up tools, QA tools, that slow down your process to go into production. This is our challenge. This is the answer. Cyrano is going to provide you with a solution to answer this vision. And once again, quality process reduces your risk, so your cost. What Cyrano does, we offer 4 product lines: Client Pack, DB Pack, Server Pack, and VT Pack, associated with methodology, support, and training. What is Client Pack? With Client Pack, we answer one business problem. Developing a large application requires management to master coding standards and design rules. The market changes every day. 5 years ago, you got your developers were employees. Today, they are consultants. It means that they do not have time when they start a project with you to learn the way you want them to develop. What we bring in the market is a repository that is going to help you to put your coding standards and design rules. And we provide you with a parser on a client side, allowing each developer to check by himself that he complies with standards that you did define with the whole team. Of course, we at the same time focus on performance, and we strongly believe that return on investment is obvious, and you will save your money and you will speed up your time to put into production the application, and at the same time you will reduce your cost, your maintenance cost for the future. DB Pack. As you know, 80% of performance issues come from SQL statements. Cyrano DB Pack provides you a tool, a set of products that is going to help you not to count your programs, but to analyze and fix your performance issues at the root of the problem, at the source of the problem. This is the transaction level. What is the return on investment? Fixing performance issues is the only way to save millions of dollars on hardware expenditures. What do you do when your PC is slow? You buy more memory. What do you do when your server is slow? You buy more faster disk, more RAM. With Cyrano DB Pack, you are going to fix the programs at the source, at the transaction level, and you are going to reduce your cost expenditure on the hardware side. Server Pack. Server Pack, we answer one big business problem. When you develop a client-server application, you check with your whole users, your developers, your project leaders, that functionalities of the application fit with your users' need. And with a graphical interface and powerful 4GL, you are able to set up really nice applications. Your main issue is to find out what will be the impact of putting into production this kind of application. Cyrano Server Pack is going to give you, is the only load test tool and stress test tool for database server. We are going not only to simulate your production environment, we are going also to analyze which transactions are causing your concurrency problem in your database. And of course, this set of products is not only dedicated for your homegrown application, it's also for software packages that you may buy. When you buy a software package, you know that functionalities are close to your users' needs. What you need to find out if you will be able to put it into production. This is the answer. And of course, as we do not want our QA products to be a burden for your organization, you do not need to program your test. We are going to speed up that process with an intuitive interface. VTPAC, we are mainly focusing on character-based application. We focus on terminal-based application with also a year 2K testing solution that is absolutely unique on the market. What the analysts say, Gartner Group, Cyrano has not only taken the lead, they have redefined the segment, they have redefined the way to test a client-server architecture. They have stretched the envelope. The Cyrano offering appears to be unique in the industry. Our research suggests that Cyrano is the best positioned company in this space, premier player in high-growth ASQ market. We have the most complete testing solution available today with 4 product lines. We develop market ASQ solution focusing on ensuring quality and performance of client-server application implemented by consultants and partners with associated method. Thank you.
Welcome to this brief presentation on the architecture of ClientPack. I'm Stuart Walsh, and I'm going to present this in hopefully in about 10 to 15 minutes. So what are we talking about when we go and present ClientPack? We're talking about application development and its hidden costs. We're looking at development and maintenance costs. What we want to be able to do is to reduce the development delays, integrate new team members. Because if you look at architectures today, development teams are not like long-hauled developers being there for 10 to 15 years. The marketplace is now contractors, consultants. They come in, they work on a project for 3 to 6 months, off they go. And all the knowledge that they've built up about the application has now moved on. So what we want to do is to be able to integrate these members more quickly into the architecture. Understanding someone else's work is always a difficult job to do. So how do we simplify that? That's another part of what ClientPack can offer. Maintaining complex applications. One of the cruelest things you have to do if you're an actual application manager. Right? In organizations today, there's a plethora of application development going on, and we offer the ability to be able to maintain the complexity of that. Usage costs. Looking at a learning curve for end users. Time lost by end users being involved in kind of either consulting of the practice of how an application is developed, or looking at the technical support and the actual deployment platforms. The answer, well, implement development standards for these 3 areas so we can get consistency, readability, and usability. Give some way of actually making standards a much more easy to use and functional part of the architecture. Why most rule books fail? If you look at most development teams today, they're given this huge book when they start working, which tells them how to develop. What they do is they chuck it away and they just go on and develop in their own manner, not according to the way that organization has built up a history. Okay? So what we want to be able to do is to give them some way to be able to come into an organization and very quickly build up their mechanism for actually developing applications according to that company's standards. So, maintaining standards on paper is just too much work. People will not do it. checking them is tedious. How can you check every line of code, every attribute in an application? It's impossible. You can't do it. There has to be some sort of data checking system, and that's what we provide in Client Pack. Changing code too late can be extremely costly. So the earlier we can get into the development cycle, the better. And what's this? Cyrano Client Pack is the solution. It automates the whole quality of an application. Okay? So let's look. Client Pack overview. We're going to look at defining development standards, how we check to adhere to those standards, how we analyze our application for quality and performance issues, and how we plan, manage, and automate GUI regression testing. These are all things that Client Pack addresses, and they're important in the architecture of today's development standards. Moving on, central to development. First thing we look at is standards definition. Have to have some way of being able to say that we can say that screens are drawn in a certain fashion, that colors, that buttons are a certain size, that menus have a certain order to them. So we have a general standardization of our code and the way we actually write things. To check all of that, we have Cyrano Winscope, which is a code quality testing tool. If you can imagine, Cyrano Standards is aimed towards managers being able to write a little set of rules and put that in a repository for them to be used. And then that will then be used by the developers, Winscope, in order to be able to check their work as they're going along. Not build a whole lot of code and then check it later on. Build it as you're going along. Then database call testing is integrated into the Cyrano Insight. Again, it's another part of investigating your application and finding out how optimized, how much quality is in your application code. Remember that this is supposed to make the whole cycle of developing an application easier. A simple way of thinking of it, our standards in Winscope as part of Client Pack offer a sort of spell checker for Power Builder development. Okay? So what it means is that we have the ability to be able to write a dictionary, and just like as if you were writing a letter in Word, Winscope will check your code as you're developing. Moving on then to the actual management of testing. We actually offer a tool which will give you the whole process of managing a development environment. So you can manage the whole idea of saying, this is what we want from our application, this is the functions we need. Okay? How do we make sure that those functions are delivered? Because a developer, unless they're really close to the actual customers and the clients of the application, would tend to go off and develop their own part of the application without adhering to what is the real functionality that's needed. Moving on, GUI testing is integrated in there so that we're able to actually test the individual GUI screens, make sure that they have the structure that we want, right? Make sure that they provide the functionality, that they provide the data that we need. All of that integrated gives us an overall set of quality from a code perspective and from an end look and feel and functionality perspective. Put those two together and you've got that seal of quality. Cyrano Standards. Alright, Cyrano Standards is about rules and convention management. Establish rules to ensure application quality and then publish those rules to developers. And it's all done electronically. There is no documentation or large folders or binders to look at. It's all online, central repository. That's what standards defines. A repository which can then be published to the developers or to any team that needs those standards. It then looks at some of these architectures, naming of objects, graphical attributes, structural components, coding syntax, support for any Power Builder object you use, and any attribute of Power Builder objects, and then be able to give you a full, complete reporting of rules and conventions as you're developing and as you're building your application. Cyrano Standards. Regain control of the development projects. Okay? What happens today is project leaders run around trying to make sure that they can understand how the development goes and how it's actually progressing. But unfortunately, what happens is they spend all their time trying to manage it rather than just smoothly being able to say, this is the way we build things, just make sure you're checking your code as you go along. That's what we want to be able to give managers of development teams today. Promote consistent development practices, produce consistent looking applications, eliminate potential for cascading problems. In other words, If one developer comes along and develops a piece of code which is a poor performing, then along comes a next generation developer, reuses that piece of code, and so on. And then you have a cascade of problems as you're going along and never really getting to the root of the source of the bad quality code, and reduce maintenance costs. Always reducing the time it takes for you to build quality applications. A buzzword you could use is RAD quality. Cyrano Winscope, application development optimization. Increase quality, consistent and performance of your application. This tool is used by the actual developers. This tool will subscribe to what Cyrano Standards publishes. It will give you the ability, a developer, the ability to check their code as they're going along. Produce code which is easier to maintain and run software which is more efficient. So that it basically speeds up their development but doesn't take them away from their central task, which is developing applications. And then the features of it is, again, as I said earlier, check adherence to standards, analyze application for common problems, and provide intuitive navigation through application structure. That's one of the key architectures of Winscope. Is it's such a benefit to developers that they're able to actually understand code which they've never written. They're able to come into an organization and use Winscope to understand their architecture. Now, the way that we actually sell this whole client pack is that it's done in a team fashion. It's all repository driven. The idea is that if you go into a client and they have 15 or 20 developers or 100 developers, you should be able to go in there and say, look, we can provide for you a license for your 100 developers, of which there will be a central repository, and all 100 developers will be able to take from that central repository to be able to do all of these tasks. Right? That's really important. That's the way we structure our actual tool set. Okay, benefits. Help developers to adhere to all of the standards automatically. Just a click of a button and they can check their code as they're going along. It speeds up that process. And if we go in and we sell this as a team product, then it really makes very good sense, especially when teams get bigger and bigger. When we're looking at 20 plus developers, then it really is of huge benefit to them. Save time, improve understanding and manageability of the applications. Cyrano Insight. This is another part of the architecture which allows us to look at database calls, and again it helps us trace poor performing database calls coming from the client. Cyrano Insight features, we can save transactions, we can put breakpoints, we can have a look at multiple database access, and we're able to see exactly what's happening from the calls that are coming from the PC. Alright, so again, all the things about analyzing transactions in client-server application, eliminate the mystery of 4GL transaction generation, assist with regression testing. Robot. Okay, now this is the part, if you remember the original diagram, this is the part about being able to create scripted screens to be able to say this is what we want from our application. And we're able to easy capture and playback for simple tests. So we're able to actually take an application and capture it and say that that's what we want. Okay, and check all the different versions and variations to make sure that we're actually providing what our customer has asked for. It does object level testing, it supports across all the variations of Windows that's out there today, and it's got a very powerful scripting language. Cyrano Robot features, it's object oriented, okay? It provides testing for 32 and 16-bit window objects and components, and it automatically synchronizes with all applications. So it's a very powerful tool to record and do functional testing of any Windows application, be it from any kind of really high-powered Whiz-All Powerbuilder application, or be it Excel or Word. Anything that's on Windows, we can actually test it. And then it logs all the results from actually testing an application. So it saves a huge amount of time when you've got a large application which are constantly changing, but that you need to test at regular intervals. Testing is nothing more than pressing a button, leaving it to run, and then coming back and seeing what happens with the results. Which screens were successful, which screens were actually unsuccessful, and why they were unsuccessful. And I'll demonstrate that a little later on. Cyrano Robot benefits. You've got a shorter test development and learning curve, reusability and portability of tests on all Windows platforms, and integrated scripting environment. So what we're talking about is just like before with standards and WinScope, which is really about the source code. This is talking about making the final product that your developers are providing to their customers, making sure that it is exactly what the customer has asked for, okay? And actually making that process as speedy and as quality-proof as possible. Cyrano Manager. Okay, this is the flagship managing part, which allows you to plan, manage, and analyze application tests. Used by a wide range of people, it allows you to be able to say, okay, well, as I'm starting to develop, I should also start to plan for testing. I should say that I will be testing my applications, and I should actually be planning for testing that as I'm developing, so that when I get to the end of the development cycle, I've saved myself time by knowing exactly what I want to test as I develop this application. And there's all the various features in there for defect tracking, so you're able to report on how the actual tool set is being used and how it's actually, of all the applications, how many of them have little bugs in them, who's actually working on those bugs, and exactly how they're going to be resolved. And it has powerful reporting features, allowing you to do something up to 1,500 different types of reports. Cyrano Manager features test and defect management system. It's got a comprehensive set of test planning and management functions, which really gives a developer management the ability to be able to look at emailing defects among a community of team of developers. It's able to look at client-server repository. We're talking about a centralized repository throughout everything we're looking at here. Cyrano Manager benefits: powerful customizable reporting and graphing, storage and organization of test cases and procedures. So everything is centralized, and the development manager is able to work from a central repository and feed out that work, how to slice up who's going to develop what, where, when, and how, who's going to test this, and email it out to the appropriate people. And he may not even be in the physical same city, state, even country. He'll still be able to manage the process. And it's got, again, that flexible detecting of defects. Okay, so that's the actual client pack. What I'm going to do now is go into a short and brief demonstration of the Cyrano standards and a Cyrano robot, showing you in brief exactly what they look and feel like. These presentations that I'm showing are available on the corporate CD, and under the corporate CD there's a various directory structure, and in there's a demo. Now you can run the CD direct and will come up with its full interface, but if you want to get direct access to the demonstrations, they're here under the structure, and what we're going to look at is standards. Just going to turn off the sound so that I can talk rather than the person in it. Let's start this off. Okay, this is Cyrano Standards. This is the tool that a manager or a person who is responsible for setting up the tests will actually go through this and set up the architecture for the standards throughout the development. I'm going to free forward through this. As you can see down along the side here, we have a list of all the basic architectural elements of PowerBuilder. So we're looking at graphic objects, user objects, data window objects, global structures, and global functions. So let's just free forward slightly here and look at, say, defining naming rules. This is one of the common things, is to be able to give a naming convention to various objects and attributes throughout your development. Here we're just going to give a window naming rule and an event on a window naming rule as well. So we're just defining that now. And we hit the OK button, and that then is saving it away. Next thing we can look at is coding rules. Within the coding rule, we're able to put in, say, maximum number of local variables. These local variables take up resources, so what we're going to do is limit people to no more than say, one local variable per script. Okay, but we could look at all sorts of other restrictions in there. Banners, computed loop end allowed, go-tos and so forth. Alright, we can save that away, and that can be saved into the central repository, and that central repository can actually then be active and go on to Winscope to actually report on your application. Now on the application here, we can see that we've analysed our work, and we can see that we have a couple of coding rules and a couple of naming rules that have been broken. So it tells us exactly the item that's been broken, the requested value that our standards wanted, and then the incorrect value. And it tells us exactly where that occurred. Okay, so in detail we're able to tell the developers as they're going along, as they're developing, exactly where they're going wrong, rather than letting them develop for a week or a month and then checking the work afterwards. Here we're doing it as they're developing, as they're working. Okay, and you can see we can report on all sorts of elements, and we can drill into items in here. Okay, so here we have user event and the location of that event itself. So it's an incorrect item that's called create, it should have had one of these, and it was on the location of W guides RTF. Right, and we can produce reports on all of this. Okay, what I'm going to do now is go on to Winscope, which is the developer tool, and this is used for developers to give them the ability to analyze their application. Here we're first going to look at the overall analysis of their application, and if we look at this here, just going to go through and look at the synopsis, which is basically a breakdown of their application, telling them what is the basic constituents of their application, how many classes they have, how many of those are inherited, how many are not inherited, the average level of inheritance. All of this stuff is important Power Builder development information, of which a developer will be trying to adhere to various elements in here. They'll be looking at their global variables, their global functions, looking at object level information, examining exactly how their objects are interacting. Let's just continue now. So what we're able to do, for instance, here, if we scroll down through this, we can actually go on down and have a look at some of the items, some of the values on those. And if we click on an item, for instance, if we click on unused local variables here, we're able to double click on it and actually right-hand mouse button and show the list. And this will show us the list of unused local variables in this application. Now it offers us full object impact analysis. So we're able to say, well, here's the variable, here's where it hasn't been used, and we're able to actually click on any one of these, right? We can sort them and so forth. So we can click on any one of these and actually drill into the actual piece of code that's where this unused local variable is created. So what it's going to do now is going to bring up that script, going right into the Power Builder development script. And this Power Builder viewer screen that we've brought up here, which shows us the script, looks exactly like PowerScript in the actual Power Builder development environment. So we're able to pop down, and we can see here, this is where the variable has been declared, but it has never been used. So it's an unused resource. Take it out and your application will be much more performant. Now we've got a navigation screen, which allows us to navigate Power Builder objects. We've got a vast list of Power Builder objects which we can filter, either on library or object type. And then we're able to drill into any one of these by clicking on the object, and then we get a summary information about that object, and then we can able to look at all sorts of statistics about it, how it's used, how we can efficiently look at its architecture, and we're able to actually right-hand mouse button here and pull up all sorts of impact information. In other words, how many times it's instantiated or referenced. It's a very, very powerful tool for if you want to be able to change your application, but you want to make sure where that object is used. So here it pulls up, this window is used 15 times throughout the application. So we're able to say, well, here's a menu, or here's a function of that window, pull up where that function is used. And we're able to again see that function in its full glory if we double click or if we right-hand mouse button into it. Alright, next thing we're going to look at is our integration into the testing suite of tools. The testing basically integration gives us coverage analysis. All of these objects here have varying levels of coverage in our testing. WinScope gives you the ability, gives the developer and the manager's ability to know how much of these objects are being tested. So we know that in this W initialization window here, the open event is fired, but 2 of the buttons on the screen are never touched. So instantly, and that's really very powerful feature, we can know that these will need test procedures added to them if we're going to provide a fully functional test. So it's one of the key differentiators, if we can say, between us and our competitors. We're able to tell you the coverage analysis for tests, all right? And WinScope is a powerful tool for that architecture. Welcome to this presentation of Cyrano Impact. Cyrano Impact is part of the Cyrano Server Pack. It offers some brand new product set in order to be able to stress test server systems. Let's get into a brief description of it. It looks at a business problem that most people are trying to address these days. We want to be able to build into client-server applications all of the complexity that is on offer today, third-party product sets, intranet, extranet, internet, all the elements, bring them together into an application and still make sure that these applications will perform according to what we would expect once it's out there with hundreds and hundreds of users. Okay, this is a quote which came from Letha Christian at USF&G, which is really talking about, they really cannot afford to put out a system that will not perform for their hundreds, and if not multiple hundreds of users. So what is Cyrano Impact? Cyrano Impact is a unique solution for stress and load testing of your database server. And it's there to help you find performance and database concurrency problems before you go into production. Right? It simulates hundreds, even thousands, even tens of thousands of real users with real business data. And the architecture itself should be an ability to build tests without programming, so that you're able to take an existing application and build a stress test from it quickly and efficiently. Cyrano Impact, you can deploy your homegrown applications or third-party software packages with confidence. It does not need access to source code. Okay, quality of tests depends on realistic test capturing. In other words, capturing from a real application with a real user sitting down doing things as if they were really there. Number of realistic users. So we're looking at how many people will be on that system doing actions during a typical day. Ease of use, all right? That's one of the things the quality depends upon. Valuable reporting capabilities. How do we find out where the weaknesses in our systems are? Because 95% of a system might be able to perform with hundreds of users, but if 5% fails, the system fails. Never do people look at the good parts, it's the bad parts that always shine. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to say 100% of this application, we know it will perform. Test completion in a timely manner. Being able to complete a test of your application in time for the deployment of that application, rather than having to wait till the application is fully developed, fully out there, and then having to somehow get together to do a 100 user, 200 user test. Confidence in extreme conditions, so that as a development manager, I know that even though I've got 200 or 300 users on my system, that if they start doing really heavy transactions, I'm confident that I've tested for it. I know that it will work, no matter what they do. So how do we do that? Okay, let's look at the architecture of this. Cyrano Impact basically gives you the ability to capture business transactions from a real application. This is the traditional client-server architecture, and what we do is we plug in Cyrano Impact, and that will record these business transactions. That's the first step, step one. recording business transactions involved in them. We then model these business transactions so that where there's one client, we model it for hundreds of clients for hundreds of thousands of transactions. Okay? And we give you the ability to play that back in any quantity you want. So we've captured a real application, and we're now able to say, we can play this back for 1,000 users doing 1,000,000 transactions. And that will really stress the systems that are needed. And not only that, but it will play it back in a variabilized form. So we're not playing back the same transactions 1,000,000 times. We're playing back 1,000,000 independent pieces of data. We use large sets of data sets, random database retrieval, file input, to actually give you a complex and thorough test architecture. So, what that gives the ability to do is we can monitor this test and see how it's performing. That gives us our output screens, and this is really what the development manager's after. Key one, the development manager wants to know, if I put this system out, will it perform? And where will it perform good, and where will it perform bad? These charts will highlight this. Here, for instance, we can see that above 21 users, we've got a performance degradation. Here we can see that the spread of average reply times on this system seems to have a mountainous climb between these ranges of times. Why? Well, we can drill in and we can see why. And these charts give a development manager an overview picture of how their system will perform. And this is not modeling, this is real, this is really simulated. And they don't need thousands of PCs set up in a simulated environment. We can do this with a few small, high-powered boxes. That's the beauty of our impact. It doesn't require hundreds and hundreds of PCs. We can be able to simulate thousands of users using maybe no more than 4 or 5 machines. And that's what a development manager can do. And they can do that within a reasonable period of time. Okay, so let's look at the solution in here. We can capture transactions from any application. It can be Unix, it can be X Windows, it could be a character-based application. It could be anything. Anything that talks to your database server through the normal mechanisms, we will be able to capture. So whether it's a software package, a batch process, we can do it all. Accurately simulating realistic loads. That's what we're able to do. And then finally, we're able to pinpoint the performance issues in the database. We can actually point and click on those charts and find out where is it that our application is going to perform poorly. Put all that together and you have an absolute industry-leading tool for finding out whether a system will work under any given stress load. Okay? The return on investment on this thing, you fix problems before you go into production, and it's 5 times less than after deployment. Think about it. You know, if a system fails after you've got developed and it's out there, a system manager can lose his job. If he's able to know that his system will work or where it will fail if it was to go out, it doesn't matter the amount of money. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, it could be millions of dollars involved. This is one of the big selling points, being able to find out before it goes out into the development. Deploy on time. You know, how many applications today do not get out there on time? Save on hardware expenditures, boosting the server does not fix the concurrency problems. Time after time, you know, the big vendors, Sun, HP, IBM, Dell, Compaq, they all make huge amounts of money out of poor performing applications. Why? Because they're selling hardware to these guys. Hardware is not the solution. You know, applications are getting bigger and bigger. And what we need to do is to optimize these applications, not buy more and more hardware, because that does not solve your problem. An extra processor, an extra 100 meg of RAM doesn't help. Getting rid of that loop inside your code does help, and we will find it. That's what impact does. Okay, what I'm going to do now is move on to a demonstration. Again, it's available on our corporate CD. I'm going to demonstrate. Again, on the corporate CD, we have a list of demonstrations under the demo directory. And then in there is the server pack. And underneath that, there will be the impact directory. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go into the impact directory and start the demonstration. Just simply double click on it and it starts a screen cam demonstration. Okay. Let's wait for this to get kicked up. These screen cam demonstrations do come with voice so that you will be able to hear exactly how to present the impact product. So, impact, all the features we're trying to get across. Ease of use, the power to create that virtual level of users. Let's try and get those features across. Let's make sure that when we leave customers, we've left them with the idea that they're going to be using a product that is absolutely new out there and will do the job for them. The first thing here, we have a wizard to be able to create tests. We've given it a name, and now we're going to select a place to run our test. This here is a connection script and a disconnection script. So they're just how their virtual users or simulated users will connect and disconnect. Okay. So we're going to move on, and now we're going to put in sample set of transactions. So we're just going to say that our select transaction, that will be 75% of our test. And we'll add a new one now, an update. And give that an update, and that will be 25% of the task. So one of the features of impact is to give balanced set of loading, so that it will represent real user systems. So here we're going to put in 50 users, or 50 transactions I should say, and in here we'll put in 25 users. And we'll make them absolutely start 1 second after each other, just like a real system. Okay, so now we've created our test. We're able to drill down in our test here and see how it's structured. So expand it down, and we can see here that we have a list of our transactions. What I'm going to do now is going to record those transactions, and this is just starting up the recording engine. It's quite straightforward. We'll be able to start up the recording engine and then actually start the application and record each of these tasks. So hit the record button, and then this toolbar appears with the record on, and now we're just going to start the demo application. Okay. And it's going to connect through our server, so not through the traditional server, but through our one. But the application will still work fine. So there it is, connects to our application, and then we hit OK. Alright, here we have a sample application. So what we're going to do is we've already recorded the connect, so now we just need to record a sample set of the other transactions. And this is where having a real user really does benefit, because they'll do it exactly like they would in normal business. So we just simply say, hit the record, and then we're ready to actually go ahead and record an update. So hit the record, and now what we're going to do is make some changes in here. Okay, going to give some guy an update in salary. I wish we could all do that. And then hit the save, and that will then fire off an update. And this mechanism has now recorded that transaction. So it's recorded the actual SQL plus the thinking time of the user. Because the user's going to spend some time scrolling around the screen, getting information. We store that kind of information in our transaction file. So now we can actually have a look and see what the user did and all the various pieces of SQL involved with it. So we're saving vast quantities of time here by doing this. We're now going to connect up to the server. Okay, and we're going to drill down into the actual table here and pull out a set of values to populate the SQL. Something I mentioned earlier is we can use real live data in order to be able to play back tests. So rather than using that number 249 a million times, what we're going to do is take this big bunch of list of numbers here, which is a representation of employee IDs, define it as an integer list, and it will be script. That means it will be shared among those virtual users. And now we can actually replace it in here. So substitute the values, and you just see it out of the corner there, get new value. Alright, so now we have a mechanism for doing what we call data spreading. And that's really representing real life data. Okay, same thing here, 249 again, and we just simply, it's all a point and click, there's no programming to be done. We're simply saying current value, and away we go. And that's fine. There's one more item here, that's a commit tran, and that's all we're going to do. What we're going to do now is we're going to put in a timer around that actual transaction, and that will allow us to time it and see how long it takes to run for all of the different virtual users. Okay, so we're going to stop the timer, and you can see how it's wrapped around that individual request that's coming out of this transaction. Okay, let's save it away. That's fine. Okay, so we've now recorded all of these pieces of transactions, so we're ready to actually go in and execute the test. Right? So this is the big crunch time. We execute the test, and then it will go in now and fire up all of that 25 virtual users. Okay, so here they're inactive at the moment, and any moment now they should become active. Okay, and we can view outputs and so forth. We're just going to get rid of some of this screen. Okay, so now they've become active, and here we have one user active at the moment, and suddenly 9 users. If we keep going, we'll have more. We'll have full 25 online any minute now. So we're able to represent, just as a real system would, first thing in the morning, people coming in and logging on every, say, whatever, a minute or a couple of minutes. So it represents just like it happens in the morning, and how it happens during the day of business. So now they're running away, and we're able to actually then say, well, what's actually each one of those virtual users doing? So we're able to actually say, give me a summary, and then drill into exactly what they're doing. So we just simply double click, and it says how much of each of those transactions that virtual user has completed at this point in time. So it gives that, the test manager some kind of input as to what's happening. Any moment now, they'll all be completed, and they'll get ready for logging off. So here we have 3 completed, and they're starting to actually log off. So it's taking its time now, and we should be ready to go on, move into the next stage, which is to actually analyze the statistics. Right, so it's just finished now, and what we're going to do now is to say, yes, we want to analyze that. So we just simply click into there. It then takes us straight into our central repository where we've stored all of the analysis for that test. And this will bring up the charting tool, which gives that manager the ability to see, well, here's all my transactions, here's all my virtual users, and query for any individual transaction the history of how that performed during our 25 user, 50 transaction per user test. Just going to tile these around the screen now to give you a feeling for it. And what we're looking at here is to see how the system performed. And this chart that we pulled up here is called our Cyrano impact statistics, and it looks at block connections, active connections, deadlocks. These are really important things to do with database transactions. So what we're able to do is to choose a particular task and then view how that performed over the life of the test. And we're able to see here that actually there was quite a few blocked connections during this test. So we're able to drill into that and find out here by clicking on the control and scroll, and then we can log in and drill down right into why that problem was caused. So we'll go in here and say, well, give us a look. Here we can see during the test we had a huge amount of people being blocked. So we had transactions blocking transactions, and here we're able to drill into those transaction durations and see exactly what's happening. And here we can see it's highlighted for us the update on this table, which was end tutorial, blocked everybody else. So we're able to actually see straight away that that table is going to need either caching or partitioning if we're going to have a high performance system. So that is the big key to impact, is the key is we're able to go from a virtual 25 user system all the way down to where are the performance problems in my system before we ship this product out. And that's what makes the Cyrano Impact product so important, because there's nobody out there that can do what we do. Nobody. Okay, and this is what we need to get out to the marketplace and sell this product like hot dogs, because it is extremely powerful and extremely important to people. Thank you for listening.
We're here today to talk about Cyrano DB Pack, which is going to help you with performance and tuning of your client-server applications. When dealing with client-server performance problems, what a lot of people start off doing is throwing more hardware at the problem. Then they'll start taking a look at their operating system, their network. Maybe SQL Server is the problem. They'll give SQL Server more memory, as much memory as possible, so they cache all the databases in RAM. That helps quite a bit, but usually not enough. Then they start possibly looking at the application design, database design, and finally the SQL transactions. Well, at Cyrano, we think the SQL transactions is the most important thing to take a look at first, and it's probably the least expensive, provided you can find which SQL transactions need to be fixed. So we would say to prioritize the list this way. Take a look at your SQL transactions first before you start spending millions of dollars on hardware. And this is backed up by the fact that if you go to Sybase Performance and Tuning class, they're going to teach you this on page 1, that 80% of performance and tuning is in the SQL or your queries that you're writing in your applications, as opposed to 20% in the systems. The system side of things is very important, but you're going to get more results if you take a look at your SQL transactions. And most of us already know this. The big problem is finding the poorly performing SQL statements, because there's SQL embedded in your application, it's in stored procedures, it's in all various types of objects. Very difficult to find the poorly performing SQL statement. Our solution to that is Cyrano Workbench. Cyrano Workbench is going to help you analyze your applications proactively. So in your development and testing phases, you're going to analyze your SQL statements, and then it allows you to define performance rules. You're going to do this in the form of thresholds. You'll see exactly how you do this in a moment when I show you the product. It's going to analyze the SQL through actual usage of the application. That's very important. You don't have to go and pull the SQL statements out of your client application, put it into ISQL, say set show plan on, etc. You just merely use the application. It's going to identify the poorly performing SQL and give you all of the detailed information you need to make the educated decisions to fix them. Things like statistics IO and show plan. And it can support any application, platform, or calling method because it is an open server. The basic architecture looks like this. Here you have a client application talking to SQL Server like so across the network. You can bring in Cyrano Workbench Server and deploy it anywhere on your network. And you merely redirect your client application through Cyrano Workbench Server, okay? And it's going to act like a transparent gateway, and it's going to capture all of the SQL statement. It's going to log all of the information, timing, statistics, show plans, and things into a normal, regular Sybase database. And we give you the table definitions for this database. And we give you a Cyrano client so that you can analyze everything either dynamically or historically at your desktop. The types of things that Cyrano Workbench analyzes are SQL from actual usage of the application, query plans, table scans, information from set statistics IO, set statistics time, which is your CPU time, the response time. Cyrano will put his stopwatch on when he sends a query to SQL Server, and then he'll record the client response time. In between that, it will give you time to get the first row and time to get the rest of the results. That gives you a watermark that tells you if you spent more time on SQL Server or more time sending results across the network. We also analyze data size, or amount of bytes coming back to the client. Now I'd like to show you the product in action. What we're looking at here is Cyrano client. And conceptually speaking, you can have various filters in between your client and your SQL Server. We call these filters contexts. You can create as many contexts as you want. Here's one called OLTP. A context is made up of three things: characteristics of SQL statements, the databases that you want to analyze, and performance rules. The characteristics of SQL statements include query text, information on logical I/O, show plan, CPU time, client response time, data flow, accesses, or running totals of how many objects you access as you flex code in your application, and SQL Server messages. The databases is very simple. You just highlight which databases you want, and the performance rules are entered in the form of thresholds. We give you 4 severities. 1 is the least severe and 4 is the most severe. You can set thresholds on table scan, CPU time, logical I/O, elapsed time, and data flow in bytes. Severity 1 is the least severe, so for instance, if a table scan is occurring in a given SQL statement and it's on a 100-row table, that SQL statement will get flagged as a severity 1. If it were on a larger table, like 800 for instance, it would be flagged as severity 4. So these numbers are a way for you to customize your performance rules so that you can differentiate which SQL statements are performing worse than other ones. So you can create as many of these filters as you want, or contexts, for various response times, different types of applications like OLTP with smaller numbers, DSS would have larger numbers. And then what you do is you map connections to these various contexts. You can map them based on login, program, or host. So it's very flexible and very configurable within the Cyrano environment. And all of these things are completely dynamic. For instance, the login someone who's currently mapped to the OLTP context could very easily be mapped down to the demo context just by changing it in the screen, and it would all happen dynamically. Another thing that you can set dynamically are the thresholds, the performance rules over here. Now we're going to see the product in action. Okay, so we're going to connect our client application, and notice how we connect to the Cyrano server rather than the normal target SQL server. That's the only difference. Now when this application connects, it sends SQL statements immediately, and we see them right here. And we can double click on any one of them and drill down for more detail. Here you get the full query text. You get a breakdown of anomalies or performance thresholds that have been exceeded. We see immediately we have a severity 1 on elapsed time, and we have a severity 2 on bytes returned. Now we can quickly go to the show plan and statistics I/O and statistics time information at one click of the mouse. So everything's packaged very conveniently for you, saving you lots of time. Now we're going to do a more involved example. We're going to go up to the client application and hit Sales Contact on the menu. And the client application actually sends a stored procedure exec contact list, and it passes it a parameter of 1. It hit a severity 4 and exceeded a table scan threshold. It did 1 table scan. Let's investigate this for more details. Okay, here I see that I hit a severity 4 on the contact table, 9,003 rows. That's very useful. And we can actually go right to the stored procedure. We can highlight the name of the stored procedure and then press the procedure button on the toolbar, and we're looking immediately at the actual stored procedures code. And we see it's doing select from this table, okay? And what you can also do is navigate to your various objects by highlighting names. We can highlight the name of the table and then hit table on the toolbar, and we're looking at that table, the contact table, okay? We can do that again for indexes, and we can see the indexes that are on that table. You'll get a list of them right here, and we see in this example there are no indexes. So that's a simple solution. It's doing a table scan because there are no indexes on this table. So we're actually going to solve this problem. We're going to create an index. We're going to mark the table for recompile. And then we're going to refire the the stored procedure, so it gets recompiled and will thus use the index the next time it's executed. Okay, we've executed it. And now I'm going to go back and retest in my client application. Sales, contact, and here we're going to see the stored procedure for the second time. First time, severity 4 and 1 table scan. The second time, no severity, no table scan. So we found a problem and fixed the problem very quickly. Now we're going to try another example. We press the higher button on the client application. And this one executes a stored procedure called insert employee. It exceeded 3 thresholds, CPU, I/O, and elapsed time, the worst of which is a severity 4. Let's investigate. Double click, and we get the full query text as passed by the client. We get a full breakdown of anomalies, and we can actually go to what we call the calling tree. This is a nested procedure call. Insert employee actually called hire, which called give indice, which fired a couple of triggers, TRI promo, TRI salary, etc. You can see the rest of the calling tree as I scroll down. This is very useful information. It's going to save you lots of time, and it represents that call with those parameters. Now we're going to try to solve this logical I/O problem. 2,142K pages of logical I/O is quite a bit for my small application. One way to get started is we can go to I/O by table, and we see that almost all of the logical I/O, 2082 out of 2140, occurs in work table 1. Let's remember that, work table 1, something's happening in temp DB. Now we're going to go to the technical data, which represents our extended show plan and statistics I/O. Now I say extended show plan because we give you the name of the procedure or trigger. Notice how the name is changing here on the left as we scroll down. So you can see exactly which procedure or trigger your show plan lines are associated with. Now work table 1 is where most of that logical I/O occurred. We're going to enter that in the search window here and quickly find it. Okay, we found it instantly, and there's the 2082 logical I/Os right here. And the most interesting thing about this example is that it occurred, in fact, in the trigger, TRI_salary, not in insert employee. So insert employee is innocent in this case. The true culprit is the trigger. And in fact, the SQL statement is on line 26, as you can see here. Now what we can do is highlight that and go press the trigger button on the toolbar, and it will bring the cursor right to line 26. And this is actually the SQL statement causing the problem. It's a select count star with a group by. That's kind of a, if you know SQL programming, it's kind of a silly select statement. The group by on the end here is causing the work table to get generated. That probably should be eliminated, which would thus eliminate 2,000 logical I/Os and solve your problem. So the point of all of this example is that you can drill down to that precise level of detail in a nested procedure call. There's 2 more features of the product that I'd like to show you. The first is the save to a file feature. You can actually save all of these SQL statements into a script that can be rerun or printed out for consulting with developers to let them know what SQL statements are coming out of their client application. We're going to do that now. We're saving it to a file, and we're going to go into Notepad to show you this file. And here it is, and you can see the SQL statements, and we actually stick goes in between. So that you can rerun it using ISQL. And the last feature I'd like to show you is the object accesses. This is, we keep track of running totals of how many times you access your various objects as you flex code in your application. So here, for instance, are the tables that we've hit so far, how many times we've read, inserted, updated, and deleted, how many times we've accessed indexes, and procedures, and triggers. This is very useful for finding your hot objects. Maybe you want to take advantage of some of the performance features of System 11. You can spread things across multiple disks, or you can use named caches, this type of thing. This will help you identify which objects you may want, maybe good candidates for doing such things. And you can also say, show me the objects that have not been accessed yet. This may help you clean up some tables that are not being used any longer, or even more importantly, non-clustered indexes, which incur needless overhead if if they're not being used. You may have some stored procedures that need cleaning up, etc. That's the end of the demo. And what we'd like to discuss now are the benefits of using Cyrano Workbench. It's going to help you effectively tune your SQL transactions. Okay, your time is too valuable to be spent trying to find the poorly performing SQL statements. Let the tool find them for you very quickly, and then you can get to fixing them. Shorter transactions means faster applications, happy users. Okay, and you're going to save on hardware expenditures. You're not going to be spending millions of dollars on bigger machines when, in fact, the underlying problem is really in the application. So that's the first half of DBPAC, analyzing transactions at a very precise, detailed, microscopic level, single-user type of environment. Now, what happens in the multi-user world? You can get concurrency problems. Lots of applications affecting SQL Server. You have deadlock issues, locked users, long-running transactions. Very difficult to find out exactly what's causing these types of problems. Okay, our solution to that is Cyrano Production. Cyrano Production is going to help you oversee application performance, keying in on concurrency and long-running transactions and locking types of problems. Okay, it allows you to define performance rules in the form of thresholds. You can alert and take action in the form of SQL scripts or operating system scripts, so you can do some very powerful things. It's going to identify transactions, and we'll show you how it does that as well. The architecture looks like this. You have lots of clients talking to SQL Server across your network, and you deploy Cyrano Production Server anywhere on your network. It can be on the same machine as SQL Server or a different one. It's also an open server. It's going to take snapshots of SQL Server activity using one open client connection, okay? And it's going to store all of its alarms and information, snapshots of SQL Server activity in a normal Sybase database. And we give you the table definitions for this database, and also a client piece of the product that sits on your desktop so that you can analyze everything dynamically or historically. And because you can write SQL or operating system scripts, you can in fact forward alarms and information from Cyrano Production to other systems, network administrative systems, etc. Types of things Cyrano Production analyzes: block processes, table locks, deadlocks, long-running transactions. Here's the list. Okay, now we're going to see this product in action. What you can do is, here's Cyrano client, Cyrano Production client. You can manage lots of Cyranos, watching lots of your target SQL servers from this one console. And just as in Workbench, you enter thresholds. Here's the screen for Cyrano Production. This is where you enter your performance rules. You get 4 severities again, 1 through 4. 1's the least severe, 4 is the most. You also get an extra column next to each severity where you can attach a SQL or an operating system script to actually take action. Now, as I click on these, you can see what it actually represents. BD stands for block duration, okay? So here we have severity 1 is blank, severity 2 is 2 seconds, severity 3 is 10 seconds, and if somebody is blocked for 20 seconds, we're going to actually fire a script that's going to take action. Okay, you can look for specific commands, dump, tran, create table, these types of things. You can build lists of commands that you're going to be alerted to with a particular severity. We look for deadlocks, physical I/O, thresholds, number of active connections, number of blocked connections, number of transactions holding blocks in the same table, or conversely, number of tables being locked by a single transaction. That would represent a large join. Program connection, program status. Here's an example of program status with a bad token. Okay, transaction duration, table locks, and workstation connections. Now, some of the examples of the types of scripts that you can enter. Here's one called mail DBA. This is an operating system script, and what we're doing here is we're actually echoing the severity and the anomaly type right out of Cyrano Production. These are called tilde variables. They're like macro substitution variables. So we can actually plug information into this script straight from Cyrano Production, and we're piping it through mail to the DBA. So in fact, the DBA is going to get an email message with some useful information right from Cyrano Production. Another example is a SQL script. Here, you tell it the server and the login that you want to execute it as, And this one is called kill process. This one is saying if the anomaly program passed in from Cyrano production is not equal to authorized night batch, kill the SPID and insert a bunch of logging information from Cyrano production into one of my own user-defined tables. So we're communicating with other systems, okay? We're customizing things. You can do some very powerful things. Whatever you can write, you can do. Here's another one called SNMP trap. This one is communicating to an SNMP agent. It's passing the anomaly value to another system via an operating system script. Okay, now let's see this product in action. We open up the list of anomalies. We have the same look and feel, obviously, as a Cyrano workbench. And we're going to see, as we generate some activity on SQL Server, we're going to see the anomalies appear. And we can double click on any one of these and drill down for more details as well. Okay, we double click on the table lock anomaly and we see a snapshot of SQL Server activity. The SPID in gray is the one that's causing the problem. In this case, it's a table lock, the severity 4. You get all of the active users. You get the ones that are runnable and lock sleep, receive sleep, but you don't get the ones that are sleeping. Okay, you get all of the locks being held and you get the available snapshots. You can double click on any of the users and you get the transactions that we're running based on a calculation, which we calculate via a catalog that we build about your databases. We build a catalog up front that examines your entire database and figures out which stored procedures are likely to hold which locks, and then based on the combination of locks being held, we give you a probability score here of what's running. In this case, you're either doing a delete on demo suite, which is a straight dynamic SQL, or you're executing the stored procedure delete underscore suite. And we can see the locks being held. There's the table lock being held by SPID 13. And if the catalog method is not quite accurate enough for you, you can actually correlate to sys audits. And in this case, we see, based on the timestamp, that SPID 13 was in fact running the delete underscore suite stored procedure. You can also take a look at some general context variables, like the CPU, busy, and connections and things. These are the at variables that you can select from SQL Server. And you can go to the other available snapshots. Here we went to the last snapshot and we see that SPID 13 started doing a rollback, which freed up the table lock. So you can see exactly how things played out even after the fact. Okay, another example, we can take a look at this one. Block duration, double click on that and we see that in this case SPID 16 is being blocked by 13 for too long. We hit a severity 2 on block duration. And finally we're going to generate a deadlock and show you how Cyrano production can help you detect deadlocks and see exactly what was happening and what caused it. There's the deadlock as a result of some table locks, I'm sure. And we double click on it and we see the users that are blocking each other. In this case, they're both logged in as SA. SPID 13 and 12 are blocking each other. And you can double click on either one of them and see which one was running which. In this case, SPID 13 was running the insert underscore client stored procedure, and SPID 12 was running change underscore department, so you could then go and analyze those in greater detail, possibly using Cyrano Workbench to do so. And then you can, again, take a look at the second snapshot. And that's it for the demo of Cyrano production. So I'd like to recap with some benefits. You're going to proactively analyze your applications. You're going to identify concurrency-related problems in production, okay? And you're going to save on hardware expenditures because you're going to be able to find the problems that are embedded in your application before you start buying a bigger box. Okay, that's not always the best solution. And thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay, we're here to talk about the Cyrano migration pack. First of all, why do we want to migrate to a newer version of SQL Server? Well, first of all, support for 492 and 10 is going to be dropped by mid-1998. That's a pretty compelling reason. However, SQL Server 11 and also Adaptive Server have some really nice features, better utilization of multiprocessor systems, improved transaction performance, etc. We're not here to elaborate on these in great detail. We're just going to talk about changes in SQL Server 11 that you need to be careful of, okay? Mainly the ANSI Level 2 compliance, which can result in syntax differences, display formatting, and conversion differences, and the new optimizer, which is going to handle some queries differently, in particular subqueries and these other examples here, okay? What that means is some of your SQL statements are going to need to change. Thus, you're going to need to find which SQL statements need to change. That's the biggest problem, is which SQL statements do I need to change and which ones can I leave alone? Well, the Cyrano migration pack can help you find these SQL statements, whether they're embedded in stored procedures or applications, data windows if you're using Power Builder, you have triggers and dynamic SQL coming in from various applications and batch programs, etc. Okay, the Cyrano migration package consists of an 8-step methodology. Step 1, we're going to do audit and impact analysis and also capture transactions. What this means is we're going to check the objects in your database and then capture transactions that are embedded in your client side of the application. In step 2, you create the new database and migrate your tables and data. You can use BCP or any tool you like for that. We're mainly concerned with the code in your applications. Step 3, you create the indexes and triggers on the new version of SQL Server. And then in step 4, we can check the SQL syntax, okay? In step 5, we check the actual results. We're going to compare results from the previous version of SQL Server against the new version of SQL Server to make sure they're exactly the same. If there are any differences, there usually are, a few at least, we're going to be able to find which SQL statements need to be modified slightly. In step 6, we check the SQL access strategy. What that means is we're going to check performance data. We're going to compare logical I/O and client response times and these types of things to ensure that things are performing either better or at least the same or better in the new version of SQL Server. Some queries are going to perform adversely at first, and we'll pinpoint which queries they are, and again, you can make the modifications that you need. And in step 8, you're going to check the performance under load. After you've checked all of the single transactions in your application to make sure that they're performing well in the new version, you then need to simulate a multi-user environment. Ideally, you'd want to do this to uncover locking strategy differences that could result in some concurrency-related issues. And finally, in step 8, you can then move into production confidently with the new version of SQL Server. So let's take a little bit more detailed look at some of these steps. And step 1, actually we'll divide it into 1A and B. Step 1A, we're going to do the audit and impact analysis. What we do here is we use the Cyrano extract utility, or you can use SQL Server Manager, or perhaps you've already been maintaining DDL scripts. But whatever method we use, we're going to ultimately get a DDL script, which is all create statements for the objects in your database. And then we're going to examine that with the Cyrano explain utility. It's going to help us uncover reserved word problems, ANSI Level 2 compliance types of issues, and common problems that would result from going from a previous version of SQL Server over to 11. And what we're going to ultimately get is a new DDL script that's been modified so that it's going to work for the new version of SQL Server. Step 1B, we then capture transactions that are embedded in your client application. The way we do that is instead of connecting your client application to SQL Server as it normally does, we're going to send it through Cyrano Workbench Server, which is a transparent gateway. It's an open server which is used for capturing SQL statements. It's going to save all of the transactions and performance data like show plans and statistics I/O in a regular Sybase database that we can then refer to later. So this is basically a repository of your benchmark test, all of the SQL statements and all of the performance data. And what we will do is from that repository we'll create a SQL script that we can keep rerunning. Okay, this is our benchmark of application usage. These are the SQL statements that we flexed out of your client application. we can then take this and reuse it against the new version of SQL Server without having to repeat all of the keystrokes and have the users do precisely what they did before. We have it right here in a giant macro, if you will. Okay, also, as step 1B, we're going to capture the results, and then we'll be finished with the previous version of SQL Server. We'll have the transaction file, we'll have the performance information, and after this step, we'll also have the results from the starting version of SQL Server. The way that works is we can then take that script that we used, okay, the dynamic SQL, and we're going to send it using ISQL with the -E option, and redirect the whole output to a file, which is going to be the results file. It's going to look like SQL statement, and then the results, the data that's coming back, and the next SQL statement results. So we're going to have that file, and we'll put it over to the side, and then we're going to create another one with the new version, and we can compare the results. Step 2, we're going to create the database. You can use ISQL, your DDL scripts. Basically, you want to take the database as it existed before you ran the benchmark, and then recreate it on the new version of SQL Server. You can use BCP, you can use SQL Backtrack, DB Artisan, okay? Create the tables, store procedures, the DDL script that you may have used Cyrano Extract if you're on 492, and also after analyzing it with Explain, it's going to be ready to go for the 11 version of SQL Server. And you can migrate the data however you wish, for instance, BCP. Okay, step 3, now that the data is there, you'll create the indexes and triggers, and again, using ISQL and the DDL scripts. And then step 4, or the beginning part of step 4, 4A, we're going to now check, using Explain again, as we checked the DDL, we're going to check the DML, or data manipulation language. This is the same script that we created from using the client application. We're going to make sure that this doesn't have any syntactic or ANSI level problems in it. And we'll have an updated version of that script, which we can then figure out which SQL statements need to be modified and possibly go deploy them back in the client application, would be our ultimate goal. Step 4B, we're going to capture the results for the new version of SQL Server. Okay, and we can actually capture results as well as the performance data in one step in this case. Instead of using the client application, we're going to use the SQL script in ISQL through Cyrano Workbench Server and redirect all of the output to a file so that we have the performance data as well as the results for the new version of SQL Server. And again, we store all of this information in the Cyrano repository. Okay, now in step 5, we actually check the results. We have our results output file from the previous version of SQL Server and the results output file from the new version of SQL Server, and we're going to use Cyrano Exact to compare them, and we're going to get a detailed report on the differences. For instance, you're going to see things like this. Here we execute the same stored procedure. Exec promotion, pass it a parameter of 1. Under the previous version, in this case 492, we get lots and lots of rows coming back. In 11, we get just 3 rows coming back. Okay, that's a difference. Your client application may be coded in such a way to handle the previous version. You need to know about these differences. Another type of thing that you may see in terms of different results is something like this. Here, in the previous version, again, exec stored procedure general underscore increase, we see a number with commas and 2 decimal places in the previous version, and in the new version, no commas and 5 decimal places, okay? So that's a formatting difference. You need to know about these. Another example, finally, is a similar type of thing where you have the commas in 2 decimal places versus no commas and more decimal places. But in this case, the number is actually different. Now that's a huge problem. We execute this stored procedure against one version of SQL Server, then a different one, and the numbers come out differently. That's probably a result of some conversion functions, but that needs to be addressed. That's important. Step 6A, we're going to check the performance data. In the first part of step 6, we're going to use examine and actually check logical I/O. And you're going to get a report that looks like this. Okay? Here we have previous version of SQL Server that we have in the first collection of performance data. We did 29 logical IOs for this transaction, which is this stored procedure EMP_RESP. Okay, 29 logical IOs in the previous version of SQL Server. In this case, it was 492. And then in 11, we did 2,037 logical IO. That's a huge difference. And what you can do is go and analyze that using Cyrano Workbench, look at the show plan information, figure out exactly what's causing that, make a minor modification. Most likely, it's probably a subquery that needs to be converted to a join or something very simple to bring it back down to closer to this number of logical I/O. Okay, step 6B, we're going to check actual response times. Again, in the Cyrano repository, we have the before and the after versions of SQL Server, and we're going to use Cyrano Expose to come up with a report that looks like this. Here we have the previous, and then the newer version of SQL Server is right next to each other here, and you can see the differences. Okay, we have 14, we have 74, 11, 399. So those are some differences, and again, you can go investigate those transactions using Cyrano Workbench, and you can do it in great detail. Now, step 7. At this point, we've corrected all of our transactions that may behave differently and perform adversely, and everything's running nicely in a test with a small amount of users or perhaps one user. Now what we want to do is look for concurrency or possible concurrency problems due to different locking strategies, etc. What you can do is run a load test with hundreds of users, which is very difficult to coordinate, or you could use a tool like Cyrano Impact and simulate lots of clients. And we have the Cyrano While Server, okay, which will take snapshots of SQL Server activity and tell you exactly where problems arise. It will look for locking strategy, block processes, deadlocks, these types of things, store everything in a Cyrano database, and you can pinpoint locking and concurrency problems using Cyrano Production Client at your desktop. Now, step 8, you're going to move into production confidently and use the full power of System 11, or Sybase 11, SQL Server 11. Don't say System 11. Say SQL Server 11. Very important. Benefits of the Cyrano migration pack. Speed up the migration process by up to 5 times, perhaps even more, depending on the size of your application and your migration effort. You're going to ensure migration quality. Every single query is going to perform correctly. You're not going to get any surprises. And you get this bonus effect of performance and tuning your application while you're migrating. Cyrano, Workbench, and Production are performance and tuning tools, and you can continue to use them for performance and tuning purposes even after you've migrated.